The forest was thick with rot, not the fresh decay of a battlefield, but something older, something that had seeped into the bones of the earth and festered. The wind stirred through the trees, carrying the damp stink of overturned soil, of things long dead but never properly buried. Henry shifted his grip on his sword, eyes flicking between the looming trees. His torch sputtered against the cold, its flame barely holding against the creeping darkness. Somewhere behind him, the alchemist muttered to himself, too engrossed in his work to care for the watchful shadows. For fuck's sake. How much longer? Henry grumbled, his voice low, wary of the quiet. The alchemist did not look up. He hunched over a wooden table cluttered with vials, powders, and a bubbling cauldron of something thick and black. "Patience, soldier," he said, scraping a fine powder into the liquid. "We stand at the precipice of eternity. The king's life is measured in grains of sand, slipping away. But this," he gestured at the potion, eyes alight with fevered excitement, "this will keep him upon the throne for decades more." Henry spat. "Aye, or kill him faster than any assassin." A thick iron chain rattled. Henry turned, his grip tightening on his sword. His eyes fell upon the thing bound to the tree a few yards away. It had been a man once, or something close to one, but now it was a ruin of flesh and sinew, its pallid skin stretched over the frame of a corpse that had refused the grave. It had no lips. Its teeth, yellowed and thick, jutted outward in a permanent, hungry grin. Its fingers twitched, flexing as if yearning for something to grasp. A thick leather strap held its throat in place, preventing its mouth from reaching anything but empty air. "This thing," the alchemist murmured, stepping closer, "was buried a fortnight ago. A farmer's son, dead of fever, left to rot, and yet—" He reached for a vial of black liquid and poured a drop onto its cracked lips. The reaction was immediate. The thing twitched, its body seizing against the chains. Its throat worked, convulsing as something wet and thick gurgled from its maw. And then its eyes moved, not dull, not empty. They saw. Henry stepped forward. "You shouldn't be." The chains snapped. The thing lurched forward, hands clawing through the air. The alchemist barely had time to gasp before it was on him, teeth sinking into his throat with a wet, crunching tear. He screamed, a high, choking wail as his blood poured hot and steaming into the cold night. He struggled, hands weakly batting at the thing gnawing at his neck, but it did not care. It chewed, lips pulling away from bone, flesh sloughing from his throat in thick red strips. Henry moved. His sword was free in an instant, cutting through the air with a practiced, brutal stroke. The blade hacked through the thing's arm, severing it at the elbow. The limb fell to the ground, twitching. It didn't stop. The creature turned, that same twisted grin locked onto Henry. It lunged. Henry raised his blade, driving it forward, straight into the thing's chest. He felt the steel punch through flesh, past ribs, deep into the cavity where its heart should be. Nothing. It didn't fall, didn't die. The thing pushed forward, forcing itself further onto the steel. Its teeth snapped at his face, hot breath filling his nostrils. Henry twisted the blade, yanking it free with a wet, sucking noise. It wasn't enough. The thing bit down. Teeth punched through the meat of his shoulder, locking onto the muscle like a wolf at a carcass. Henry roared in agony, staggering backward, but it held on, jaws clamped tight, chewing, tearing. He dropped his sword, his vision blurred, he fell. Somewhere beyond the haze of pain and blood, the alchemist twitched, his fingers flexed, his body spasmed. Henry's breath came ragged. His limbs were heavy, his heartbeat slowing. His world shrank, and then something inside him shifted. His fingers moved, his eyes opened, his body rose, but not as a man. Not anymore. The forest was silent, save for the wet sound of bodies finding their feet again. The first of many. The kingdom awaited. Morning light creeps through the wooden shutters, thin beams cutting across the stone walls of my chamber. The warmth of my blanket is tempting, but the clanging of armor and distant chatter from the courtyard tell me I've lingered long enough. Another day of training awaits. I push myself upright, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. My body protests, a dull stiffness in my arms and back from yesterday's drills. Nothing unexpected. If a man wakes without a few aches, he either trained poorly or not at all. Swinging my legs over the edge of the cot, I plant my feet on the cold stone floor. The air bites, the kind of morning chill that seeps into your bones if you stand idle for too long. I reach for my tunic, tugging it over my head before strapping on my belt and slipping into my boots. My sword rests against the wall, its leather-wrapped hilt worn from years of use. It was once my father's, then my brother's, now it is mine. As I step into the corridor, the castle hums with life. Servants scurry past with baskets of bread and pitchers of water, their heads bowed, their hands quick. I nod to a passing knight, his polished breastplate catching the morning sun as he strides toward the great hall. "About time you woke, William," a voice calls from behind. I turn to see Thomas, his arms crossed over his chest, grinning like the fool he is. His dark hair is tied back, his tunic slightly askew, as if he dressed in haste. "I wake when I damn well please," I shoot back, smirking. "You'll please the captain more if you're at the training grounds before he starts swinging at latecomers." "Aye, well, best we make haste then." We fall into step together, descending the worn stone steps toward the lower courtyard. Others join us along the way. James, broad-shouldered and thick as an ox. Robert, lanky but quick with his blade. And Matthew, ever complaining about his lack of sleep. I swear by St. George, if the captain makes us run the field again, I'll throw myself from the walls. Matthew groans. If you do, land on the hay cart this time. Robert says, smirking. Last time you nearly broke your leg. Laughter follows us as we enter the training grounds. The yard is alive with the sounds of sparring, swords clashing, wooden shields splintering, men cursing as they take hits they should have dodged. The air is thick with dust and sweat, the familiar scent of hard labor. The captain stands near the center, his eyes sharp as he watches a pair of knights trade blows. He turns at our approach, brow furrowing. Late again, William. I grin, shrugging, only by a breath. He snorts. A breath is enough to cost a man his life in battle. Take up your sword. We'll see if that grin lasts through the morning. I step forward, drawing my blade. Around me, the others do the same. The drills begin, the familiar weight of steel in my hands, grounding me. Strike, parry, block. The rhythm is second nature, a dance of survival. For now, life is simple. The sun is high, beating down on the training yard, turning the dirt beneath my boots to dust. Sweat beads along my brow, stinging my eyes, but I do not falter. My blade meets Thomas's in a sharp clash, steel grinding against steel. He grins through his panting breath. You're slowing, William. I smirk, shifting my stance. Or maybe you're just getting sloppy. Thomas lunges, aiming for my ribs. I step aside, parrying his attack, then counter with a quick strike toward his shoulder. He barely manages to block it, stumbling back a step. The others watch from the sidelines, murmuring their bets on who will fall first. We've been at this for a while now, and exhaustion tugs at my limbs, but I refuse to be the one to break first. I press forward, driving Thomas onto the defensive. His footing falters, his grip slipping just slightly, and that's all I need. I pivot, bringing my sword down hard. Hold. The sharp bark of an unfamiliar voice cuts through the yard. I halt mid-swing, stepping back, blade still raised. The other soldiers turn as a man strides into the training grounds, his royal blue tunic emblazoned with the king's sigil. A messenger. The yard falls silent. The only sound is the heavy breath of sparring men and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The messenger scans the gathered soldiers before his eyes settle on the captain. His Majesty commands an urgent gathering of men, he announces. The alchemist and his escort have not returned. They were due back at sunrise. The silence deepens. My chest tightens. Henry. I sheath my sword, stepping forward before anyone else can speak. I'll go. The captain's gaze flicks to me, unreadable. You're sure? I say without hesitation. He's my brother. A pause, then the captain nods. Very well. Gather your gear. You ride within the hour. I turn, moving quickly toward the barracks. Thomas catches my arm. William, are you certain? They could have been delayed. They wouldn't have been, I say firmly. Not Henry. Thomas hesitates, then sighs, clapping my shoulder. Then I'll go with you. I nod, grateful. As I gather my things, I push down the unease crawling up my spine. Henry is late. That alone is troubling. But deep in my gut, something tells me this is worse than a simple delay. We rode in silence. The forest ahead was quiet, too quiet. No wind stirred the branches, no birds called from the trees. Even the insects had gone still. I'd ridden this path before, years ago during a hunting expedition with my brother. Back then, the woods had been full of life. Now it felt like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Thomas rode beside me, his brow furrowed, eyes scanning the underbrush. Sir Edrin, grizzled and unshakable, took the lead, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. Behind us came 3 younger soldiers from the garrison, Alric, Jonah, and Elias. Good lads, eager to prove themselves. I prayed they wouldn't have to. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. The air told us enough. It stank of rot and old blood. Something foul had passed through here. After nearly an hour of slow progress, Sir Edrin raised a gloved hand. We stopped. Ahead, the trees gave way to a small clearing. I recognized it immediately. "This is the place," I said. My voice felt out of place in the hush. They were meant to set up here. The others dismounted, weapons drawn, eyes sharp. I tied my horse to a gnarled tree and stepped forward. The first thing I saw was the cauldron, black iron, half buried in the mud, still standing where the alchemist must have left it. Its contents had long since cooled to a tar-thick sludge, flies buzzing lazily over the surface. And then I saw the blood, not just a pool, a field of it. It stained the earth in wide, dark smears, splashes on the trunks of nearby trees, a trail of handprints dragged across the dirt. One of the younger soldiers gagged behind me, but I couldn't look away. The blood was thick, dried in some places, still wet in others. It was too much for one man, more than enough for 2. My boots squelched as I stepped forward. That's when I saw it, lying half buried in the leaves. Henry's sword. I knew it instantly, the worn leather wrapping on the hilt, the nick just above the guard from the time he deflected a war axe. It was smeared in gore, the steel darkened nearly to black. I bent down slowly, hand trembling as I lifted it, still heavy, still warm. "William," Thomas called gently. I looked up to see him standing a few paces away, crouched beside something in the brush. I walked over, heart hammering. He held up a torn scrap of cloth. Blue and black, the colors of our uniform. The edge was shredded, as if torn free during a struggle. There were dark fingerprints on it, bloody. "I don't see any tracks," Sir Edrin muttered, scanning the perimeter. "No sign of where the bodies went. No bodies, but this much blood," I whispered. "Where in God's name did they go?" Elias spoke from across the clearing, his voice tight. "You think animals took them?" "Animals don't clean up after themselves," Thomas said, and they sure as hell don't drag bodies off without leaving so much as a trail. I stared at the ground, at the sword in my hand. Henry would have fought to the death. He wouldn't have let himself be taken. But if he was dead, why wasn't he here? Why wasn't anything? A chill ran through me, sharp as steel. Something terrible had happened in this place. I could feel it in my teeth, in my spine. I looked to the trees. Something was watching. I could feel that too. "We need to get back," I said, rising. "Now, before nightfall." Sir Edrin nodded grimly. We mounted up again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. The forest was holding a secret, one soaked in blood and silence, and whatever had done this, it was still out there. We reached the village just past midday. It was called Darnwick, small, quiet, a half-day's ride east of the castle. Henry and the alchemist had passed through it on their way to the woods. We hoped someone here might have seen them, or at least had word. But as we rode in through the main path, I knew something was wrong. The gates were open. The fields beyond the wooden palisade had been left half-harvested, scythes abandoned in the dirt. No smoke rose from hearths, no children ran beneath the eaves, no dogs barked. Just silence, unnatural, complete. We dismounted in front of the chapel. Its doors hung ajar. One of them cracked down the center like a split rib. Thomas stepped ahead of me, hand on the hilt of his sword. "Where is everyone?" Elias whispered behind me. I didn't answer. My eyes were drawn to the ground. Muddy cobblestone, darkened with something thicker than rain. Blood. It smeared across the street in wide streaks, dried in some places, still tacky in others. A trail of it led into the chapel. Sir Edrin signaled with a raised fist, and we moved in cautiously, weapons drawn, boots crunching over shattered pottery and scattered belongings. Inside the chapel, pews were overturned. Candles lay in broken pools of wax. At the front, the altar cloth had been torn away, and the stained glass behind it, St. Theobald, standing triumphant, was shattered inward, shards glittering across the floor. Blood had soaked into the floorboards, pooled beneath the pulpit. But there were no bodies, no wounded, no signs of a fight. Just the evidence of one. Then came the noise, a low, rattling moan, wet and inhuman. Elias froze. What in God's name was... It lunged from the shadowed corner of the chapel, filthy, fast, and wrong. It had once been a man, maybe a farmer by the rags hanging off its frame, but its skin was gray and bloated. The eyes were milky white, rolled up in their sockets like a dead man in the river. The mouth hung open far too wide, teeth slick with blackened blood. It sank its teeth into Jonah's shoulder before anyone could react. Jonah screamed, falling to the floor as the thing clawed at him with grotesque strength. The others moved quickly. Sir Edrin drove his blade into its side. Nothing. Thomas hacked at its arm, severing it, but the thing barely reacted. I stepped forward, drove my sword straight into its chest. A clean blow, center mass. Still it fought. It twisted and snarled. Blood, its own or Jonah's, spilling freely from its mouth. "Why doesn't it die?" Elias shouted, panic in his voice. "Legs," Ser Edrin barked. "Take the damn legs." Thomas obeyed, swinging low with a grunt, cutting through the thing's shin. It toppled but kept crawling, dragging itself toward Jonah, snapping its bloodied jaws. Elias grabbed a rusted iron candle stand and drove it down again and again, smashing the thing's skull against the chapel floor until bone cracked and flesh burst open in a spray of black ichor. Finally, it stopped. The chapel fell still again, save for Jonah's cries. He clutched his shoulder, blood pumping between his fingers. "Get pressure on it." I knelt beside him, fumbling for a cloth. Hold it down." Thomas crouched, eyes wide. What was that thing? Ser Edrin shook his head slowly. It was dead. "No," Elias said, his face pale. "That thing was something else." I looked down at its ruined body. The eyes still twitched faintly in their sockets. The mouth moved as if trying to form a word. It hadn't felt pain. It hadn't hesitated. It had just wanted to feed. And worst of all, Jonah, bitten, pale and sweating, was beginning to tremble. We had no name for what we'd just seen. And Darnwick wasn't a village anymore. It was a warning. The road stretched empty before us, winding through thick groves and hills heavy with shadow. The trees creaked in the wind like bones settling. No travelers passed. No carts rumbled in the distance. Just the rhythm of our horses' hooves and the occasional cough or groan from Jonah. He rode slumped in his saddle, head down, hands trembling as he clutched his side. We'd tied his wound tight, packed it with cloth, but it wasn't helping. Sweat soaked his tunic. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Hold on," I muttered to him. "We're not far." He didn't respond. Thomas rode just ahead, his jaw set, lips drawn into a tight line. No one had spoken for nearly an hour. We were all thinking the same thing, but none of us dared say it. Then we saw him, a lone figure stumbling over the hill ahead, half running, half collapsing with every few steps. His clothes were torn, soaked in blood down one side. He held his ribs with one arm, the other flailing for balance. We slowed our mounts. "He's wounded," Ser Edrin muttered, raising a hand to signal the halt. The man saw us. He waved frantically, staggering toward us down the middle of the road. "Stop! Stay back!" he cried. "They're behind me. They look like people, but they're not. They don't die." His legs gave out and he crashed to the dirt. For a moment, I thought he'd passed out. I leapt from my saddle and ran to him. "Easy," I said, kneeling beside him. "What happened? Who attacked you?" He coughed, blood spraying from his lips. His eyes darted between us, wild with terror. "Monsters," he whispered. "They tore through Darnwick. Bitten men get up and keep coming." I ran until my legs gave. I leaned closer, and with the last of his breath, he rasped, They number in the dozens. Then he went still, only for a moment. His chest shuddered, his fingers twitched, his eyes rolled back into his head, then snapped open wide and milky. "Back!" I shouted, stumbling to my feet. The man arched his back in an unnatural spasm, bones cracking audibly. His arms shot out, clawing the dirt. His mouth opened far too wide, jaw cracking, and he released a gurgling, animalistic shriek. He lunged. Sir Edran met him with a boot to the chest, knocking him backward. But the thing sprang up again as if nothing had broken. It grabbed at Elias, who stumbled trying to draw his sword. "Damned thing won't stop," Thomas shouted, slashing at it. The blade cut deep into the creature's arm. No response. It turned, locked eyes with Jonah, who sat helpless in the saddle, barely able to stay upright. Then, thwop, an arrow buried itself deep into the creature's skull, just above the brow. The thing shuddered once, then dropped like a sack of grain. I turned. Elias stood behind me, bow still raised, string trembling. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Jonah groaned again, louder this time, his breathing shallow, erratic. "We ride," Sir Edran barked. "Now." We didn't waste time mounting. The horses protested the sudden pace, but we pushed them hard. I looked back once, just once. The thing lay still, arrow still jutting from its ruined head, but the words lingered in my mind like a curse. They number in the dozens. The city gates opened just before dusk. The guards waved us through without ceremony, though their eyes lingered on Jonah, pale as a corpse, hunched in his saddle, sweat pouring down his face. The moment we cleared the inner walls, Sir Edran signaled to two of the watchmen. "Take this man to the royal physic," he said. "Tell them he's been bitten by something not right." The guards hesitated. One made to ask a question, then thought better of it. They helped Jonah down, slinging his arms over their shoulders. He didn't protest. That frightened me more than anything. He didn't even look back as they led him away. We rode the rest of the way through the city, hooves striking cobblestone in sharp rhythm. I expected stares, whispers, our armor bloodied, our faces grim. But the people paid us little attention. They already knew something was wrong. By the time we reached the keep, we were met at the doors by a steward in crimson and gold. "You're to come with me," he said. "His Majesty has been expecting your return." Expecting. We followed him in silence, up the stone steps and through the high vaulted corridors lit by iron sconces. The smell of smoke clung to the air, not the scent of wood fire, but pitch, oil, preparation. The throne room doors swung open. The king stood not on the throne, but beside the war table, a map of the kingdom spread wide, tokens marking the roads and cities. The queen stood nearby, her face pale, hands clasped tightly before her. Around them were generals, knights, advisors, all murmuring, pointing, arguing in hushed tones. They looked up as we entered. "Sire," Ceredran bowed, as did we. We bring grim news. The king raised a hand. We've heard. Reports have come in from Hollowmere, Dunridge, and the Far Road camps. Refugees speak of pale men walking by night, devouring all they catch. Scouts haven't returned. No ravens from the outposts. We found one of our own, I said. Bitten, changed. It took an arrow to the skull to stop it. A murmur ran through the court. They feel no pain, Thomas added. No fear, they just keep coming. The king's face hardened. Then it is as we feared. He turned to his captain of the guard. Send the order. All able-bodied men are to report to the keep at first light. Barricades on the eastern and southern roads. Bolster the gate. Pull every smith and mason from their homes. We'll need iron, stone, and oil. To burn? The queen asked quietly. To survive, he answered. We were dismissed shortly after, but I couldn't rest. I climbed the steps to the outer wall as night fell, armor still clinging to me like a second skin. The city spread out below, torches flickering to life in the narrow streets. Above it all, the stars came out, cold and distant. I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush past me. For a moment, there was only the sound of banners flapping and the creak of wood settling. Then, a sound. Faint but unmistakable, a low, drawn-out moan carried on the wind. Not one voice, dozens, hundreds, no words, just hunger. I opened my eyes, staring into the eastern dark beyond the hills. Nothing moved, but the sound kept coming, closer now. They were out there, and they were coming.